Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video giving a review and reflections as well on Justice League, released in 2017. Now there will be spoilers in this review, so you haven't caught up yet with this film or any previous entries within the DC cinematic universe, then I'd advise you to stop watching now, go away, catch up with the movie and then come back to this review. And this review is of course in preparation for the upcoming Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is due for debut on HBO Max on March the 18th. Now I've been reviewing his previous DCEU entries, and you can check out both reviews for Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman within my channel, and I will leave links for both reviews within the description and the end title card of this video. So here we will talk about the overall Justice League movie, which of course was the teaming up of the DC superheroes on the big screen for the first time. Now we all know the background in terms of the movie and its setting up, but just in case anyone doesn't know, then I will advise you with more information here. Now there will also be a timestamp within this video where I'll discuss various topics about this movie, so if you don't want to watch this video necessarily in its entirety, then you can check out the timestamp and look at the various topics, and then you can view those each at your own pleasure. So going back to the overall setup of this movie, of course, director Zack Snyder was to continue his vision from Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman in what was initially going to be a two-part movie story arc. Now, when showing his initial project and plans to Warner Brothers, the executives, they weren't very satisfied following the negative reception from Batman vs Superman. According to various reports and articles, they viewed the original cut as unwatchable, so they asked Zack Snyder to go back and rework it. Now of course, during this process, the very sad and unfortunate incident of Zack Snyder's daughter committing suicide had forced him to step down from the project. Faced with the dilemma of either pushing the project back or going ahead with the initial release, Warner Brothers decided to go ahead with filming, hiring Joss Whedon, who directed the Avengers of course, to come in and finish off the project. Now depending on various reports and articles, Whedon carried out various reshoots and rewrites, completely changing the tone of Snyder's vision, with the mandate of injecting a lot more levity and brightness and humour, because that was one of the biggest criticisms of Batman vs Superman, that it was very dark and unappealing for mainstream viewers. Released on November the 17th 2017, it has Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot reprising their roles as Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman. We have the new inclusions of Ray Fisher as Cyborg, Jason Momoa of course comes in as Aquaman, and we have a brief small appearance from J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon. So the story is that following the events of Batman vs Superman, the world is mourning the death of Superman from the battle against Doomsday. Batman is feeling remorseful after his initial fight and obsession with Superman. He works with Diana to collate a team of the most powerful superheroes, or metahumans as it's known, to combat a supposed incoming evil that he fears from his premonition and nightmare, what we saw in Batman vs Superman. The signs of his premonition seem to come true when we learn that a being from Apocalypse, Steppenwolf and his group of parademons has arrived on Earth in search of the infamous mother boxes, which are located in different countries all over the Earth. If all three mother boxes are collated together, this will provide enough power to take over the planet. So the superheroes have to unite together to stop Steppenwolf's quest in order to take over the world. Now when looking back on Justice League, my expectations were lowered significantly following Batman vs Superman. The basis here being, if they couldn't get right Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman together in the same movie, then what hope would there be when juggling more characters plus a new villain as well? As well as continuing the established character arcs from the previous movie, they also had to establish new characters into a story that was already impacted a lot by the previous movies as well. So I didn't really have a lot of hope, and really when looking back on the trailers, nothing really excited me that much. And to be honest, I think, as I mentioned before, they were really at more of a disadvantage following up from the previous film. So again, just going back on what happened before, I really wasn't that much hyped on the prospect of Justice League, and really was going to it with a much more of a feeling of indifference. Now to quickly focus on the good points within the movie, following the bleak, hardcore, serious tone of Snyder's vision, There are at least some moments of levity and charm within this movie, and there are actually little small pieces of chemistry and camaraderie between the characters. I think that was something that was very much lacking within Batman vs Superman. We actually get some levels of brightness and optimism from the colour template, also to the tone of the characters, and I think that was at least something to at least be credited towards this, because as we all know, the DC heroes have a huge mix of characters. You can't all make them the same. They can't all be in this typical grind mark Batman tone of philosophy. You know, you need that variance and that contrast between the characters. It makes for a much more entertainment movie, and at least there was some remnants of showing these heroes in the more traditional and heroic versions that they should have been translated to in the first place. Though arriving late in the film, we at least get hints of a brighter Superman who actually smiles throughout this movie. I mean, there's one horrible version of that at the beginning of the movie, which I'll mention later on, but I did like the small moments of camaraderie that he had, particularly between him and the Flash and Cyborg as well, when he makes his emergence later on throughout the movie. Gal Gadot continues to be a solid interpretation of Wonder Woman following the success of the 2017 film with Patty Jenkins. Ray Fisher as Cyborg at least has a decent presence as Victor Stone, and there was potential to expand on his character, though I don't think the movie really utilised this fully. As Aquaman, Jason Momoa really is, to be honest, playing himself, but he has some sort of likability as Aquaman, and he of course will continue this later on in what was turning out to be the most successful entry within the DCEU, when Aquaman grossed over $1 billion in 2019. We do at least get some reference to the lore of the DC Comics in one of the movie's best scenes, where we see the original invasion of Steppenwolf on Earth thousands of years earlier. It's a really typical Lord of the Rings type of battle, where we see the alliance of mankind, Olympians, Amazonians and Atlanteans, and we also get a Green Lantern as well involved within this battle sequence. And I think this sequence was handled very well and will bring a lot of pleasure if you're a major fan of the DC mythology. The other major set piece involves Steppenwolf arriving in Themyscira for one of the mother boxes, and I think it's quite a thrilling sequence as we see the Amazonians passing the mother boxes together to one another away from Steppenwolf. And I just wish the other action sequences within the movie had the same excitement and verve that this one had had. Now, unfortunately, we have to talk about the many bad points within this film, so I'll try to be as concise as I can. And really, the film as a whole is lackluster and an underwhelming effort in terms of interpreting the Justice League. You know, we go back over the years, and in particular we look at that incredible Justice League and Justice League Unlimited animation series way back in the early 2000s, and that for me was the near perfect translation of the DC superheroes within the Justice League. Every superhero got their spotlight amongst these huge fusion of adventure and science fiction and magic and escapism, and it was a near perfect way to show the Justice League on screen. And this movie in comparison falls way short. There is such an inconsistency in terms of the film's tone and direction, and this was to be expected following the reshoots. You know, at least Snyder's films, there was one consistent tone because it's coming from one filmmaker's vision, but when you get a fusion of a different filmmaker, particularly of Joss Whedon, if you look especially at the Avengers, when there's such a contrast in terms of the ideals and the approaches in that film in comparison to Batman vs Superman, you're going to get this. You're going to get a weird mix of brightness and darkness, and some trying to find a compromise between the two, and it never really works throughout this movie. It really does feel like an overcourse correction from Snyder's tone, and it just comes across a lot as clumsy. You know, we look at particularly Steppenwolf, who is just an awful villain, you know, one of the worst villains within comic book history, very poorly rendered in terms of CGI and lacking any depth or threat or personality. He is literally just a cannon fodder for the team to unite against and beat up over time, so that was really disappointing as well. Even his design is horrible, and of course in the Zack Synder version they've attempted to bulk up and improve his design, and you can make of that what you will. Ben Affleck as Batman, whilst removed from the murderous Punisher-like personality that we saw from Batman vs Superman, Here now he just really comes across as a jaded, tired version. He's really not a compelling character at all. They've tried to infuse some sort of humour, and we get a very awkward, jokey approach, particularly when we have the battle against the superheroes and the resurrected Superman halfway through the movie, and it just never works. And of course, following the previous issues that Ben Affleck was having off the screen, you could really see that his heart wasn't in it right now, and he was just going through the motion, and it once again shows how mishandled they interpreted Batman as a character. We then have Ezra Miller as Flash, who's very much the stereotypical chatty, very nerdy personality. Intended as a supposed comic relief, he just comes across as annoying, and it's equally frustrating given how good the Grant Gustin interpretation was from the CW show, which is now going into its 7th season. And you think if they can produce that level on a television budget, then why couldn't we get something of an equal quality for the first cinematic appearance of the character? You know, whilst he may not be on quite the same iconic level as Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman, the Flash has grown in popularity over the years, and it's very well known, I think, in today's modern culture. So this was a massive opportunity to do something really special from the character, but it just comes across as very disappointing and very nondescript overall, and doesn't leave me with too much enthusiasm going ahead for the Flash's own individual movie, which I believe is still scheduled for a 2022 release. The movie CGI overall looks very subpar and generic, along with the other action sequences involved, and the overall story and climax feels very flat and doesn't really get you excited for more adventures, which is the biggest crime. The ending itself is very abrupt, and I will talk about that later on within this video as the reasons why, but it just overall in terms of a product just comes across as very unimaginative, very by the numbers, when you consider now that the superhero genre was really thriving. We had 3 MCU movies this year, and actually Justice League was the 3rd DCEU movie this year, following Wonder Woman and Suicide Squad as well. And Justice League came off as probably the worst, I would say, along with Suicide Squad that particular year as well. So it was just overall a massive disappointment, and I really can't complete this review without talking about the movie's opening scene, which just cements, I think, the studio's complete disrespect of Superman. The horrible CGI main effect, where we have an opening where Superman is talking to a supposed media on an Instagram, and we have that horrible mouth effect where he's talking and his mouth just isn't aligned with the rest of his face. It just looks disgusting. It looks completely horrible. Now this was, of course, was a result of Henry Cavill filming at the time Mission Impossible Fallout, and he wasn't allowed by Paramount to shave off his moustache. So in order to fix this, they had to CGI out his moustache when doing the previous reshoots, and it just looks horrible. And there are other certain scenes throughout the movie where you can clearly see there's a horrible disconnect in terms of his facial structure. And again, if they were really serious about this film, they would have pushed it back or tried to work out some sort of compromise in Paramount where he could have shaved off the moustache, but they didn't, and it once again shows where their intentions really were at in terms of this movie. So if I had to give an overall score for Justice League, I would give a 5.1 out of 10. Again, just a massively disappointed and lackluster effort, underlying the true potential that we could have really seen from this movie had they taken a lot more care with the project. Now we talk about the film's box office, and in a budget of nearly 300 million, and this is of course following various rewrites and reshoots included, it only managed to gross 657 million worldwide, which is actually 11 million less than Man of Steel. So having come from full circle from the beginning of the franchise, it really showed that there was such a downtone in terms of the reception and the overall perception of this franchise, and really I think was a death knell in terms of the DCEU following forward, even though we had subsequent movies in both Wonder Woman 1984 and Shazam after that as well. Now there are multiple reasons why I think this underperformed and actually lost money for Warner Brothers, which is incredible considering the amount of resources they had at their disposal. Now the first thing I think clearly was the bad aftertaste from Batman vs Superman, which had no doubt turned off a lot of fans and general audiences who really had no investment in seeing any more versions of these characters. So again, as I mentioned before, there was much less hype and excitement going ahead for these movies. The Justice League, you know, the behind the scenes drama, it was all well known without the public as well. And any time where you have extreme knowledge of reshoots or rewrites or changes going on, it does put off a lot of viewers because it doesn't elicit a lot of confidence within the movie. If you think it's a disorganization and a mess behind the scenes, then we normally assume that the actual product itself is going to be a mess as well. And it was all too well known what happened within Justice League, and I think it just emphasized again how messily handled the DCEU was handled in terms and comparison to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We of course later discovered that amidst the reshoots that Warner Brothers had mandated the film to be no more than 2 hours, and this stripped away a lot of the story potential, and you can really tell, certainly in the last 15 to 20 minutes, how rushed the film does and how quickly it wraps everything up, and it just really provides no satisfying payoff in terms of the story and the concepts they were trying to bring through. It was also confirmed that the reason Warner Brothers didn't delay the film post Snyder's departure was so that the executives could keep their annual bonuses from the assumed profit that the movie would have brought. And for me, that's a shocking development, which shows again the lack of real investment and care that they have within this project. You know, you can criticize the Marvel Cinematic Universe as much as you want, but this is something that would have never happened in terms of the Marvel movies. You know, at the end of the day, you really need to take care of the product. It's what goes on during the setup and the filming and the behind the scenes. Those are the key elements to make sure that the movie is successful. So if you are clearly just making this a rush job so that you can get your bonuses, I think that's a real, you know, show of bad form and impression from the Warner Brothers, and once again just indicates how very little they care about these movies. And that is the underlying element when we talk about the ultimate problem within the DCU and starting up any movie cinematic universe. If you don't care about the properties and the IP and the characters, then you're just going to fail. If you see it more as just an IP just to make money, the irony is that you actually lose money, and that if you had the time to take the care and develop these characters more steadily, just like we did with the Marvel movies, then you actually would have made more money, because as I mentioned before, the DC heroes are far more iconic and recognized in terms of a global culture than what the Marvel movies were when they both started off their universe. And if you remember, the MCU didn't have their main big hitters in terms of Spider-Man and the X-Men. They had to start off their universe with their B-list and C-list characters, so they had a much more difficult job in setting up their universe, and they've achieved it phenomenally. And the way that the DCEU has fallen flat is really such a tragedy, I think, for fans and non-fans alike. And like I said before, when you look at previous interpretations, particularly that Justice League Unlimited animated series, it just shows again the amount of huge potential that was squandered. So it was just a massive shame, and for all the properties and all the iconic characters that they have, it really has amounted to near nothing overall with this movie. So really now we just look ahead now to the ongoing legacy, which is of course the up and coming Snyder Cut version of Justice League, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video. This of course would be the fully restored original 4-hour version. So I will probably at least expect a more cohesive film, a more consistent film, but whether it will be actually better, we don't know, or whether we will get a similar effect as what we saw with Batman vs Superman, we will of course have to wait and see what we get in terms of that finished product overall. But again, those are my overall thoughts and main feelings on the Justice League released in 2017. Just a massive disappointment, very lackluster effort, and once again shows that if you don't care about the properties and the characters within your IP, then you are going to get a very mediocre product at the end of the film. So those are my thoughts and feelings on Justice League released in 2017. Let me know what you think in the comments below. This now completes my overall set of reviews leading up to the Snyder Cut, which of course I will provide a non-spoiler and then a spoiler review when it releases on HBO Max on March the 18th. What are your thoughts and feelings going ahead? I'm seeing a lot of people are very hyped for this project, but are you very skeptical, or are you, like me, just happy now that once we get the Snyder Cut, we can now bring everything to a close? And then overall, I think what needs to happen is that the DCEU needs to reboot and start again and take more time and care in terms of building their universe. Now, whether we will get that because of the multiverse plans, we will wait and see. But overall, I just think the Justice League emphasises a massive failure in how not to build a cinematic universe involving the DC heroes. So please hit and like those subscribe and notification buttons and help me grow more content and provide more reviews like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.